Winterboer this morning, and we're going to be with each other for the next 3 hours, and I cannot wait to see what we've got installed today. We are with Africam's Old Donyo camera up in Kenya, and this is on a massive wilderness area, 111,000 hectares. And what we're looking at there is a absolutely stunning picture of a Maasai giraffe. Now, I know that it's a Maasai giraffe because, firstly, of its location. We're in southern Kenya on the Tanzanian border, very close to Amboseli National Park. And then because of those very broken patterns on their coat, you can see the way that the light is just catching this giraffe is stunning in its detail and give us such a nice opportunity to watch it and hopefully compare it to the common giraffe from further down in the African continent. Now, this is live and it's interactive. So you're obviously watching it on the app, but if you want to ask me some questions, you're welcome to. You just need to go to the WildEarth website and register there, and then you can ask me questions, and our directing team will feed those questions through to me, and hopefully we can have a discussion about it today. The weather at Old Donyo today, as you can see, it's partly cloudy, but there's no chance of rain, so we're not going to get this massive cloud buildup. And it's around about 20 degrees centigrade right now there, which is about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Sorry, I'm having to click on my conversion over here. I don't quite know how to do the sums in my head between centigrade and Fahrenheit just yet. It's quite a complicated thing, actually, to be honest with you. But why don't we have a look at a better weatherman than me? As you can see from all of these tabs that we got going on at the moment, we've got lots of cameras coming to you from all over East and Southern Africa today. And I just find it to be the most fascinating thing ever. The fact that we can jump from one location thousands of miles north or south and east and west and come to you from such diverse ecosystems. I think it's one of the best things that's ever happened, to be quite honest with you. The fact that I can be speaking to you from South Africa, that's where I'm located. I'm located on the borders of the Kruger National Park. And we don't have giraffe like that one that's just walked off there now. We have the more common giraffe down here, or the southern giraffe. There's a distinct difference between the two. Notably, though, is those patterns, those darker blotches on their skin. The giraffes here in South Africa don't have that very jagged edge to their coats. However, they do have the skull development. Now, I know that this is a male giraffe, apart from the obvious on its belly. If you have a look at its head, you'll notice that the horns are quite stubby, relatively speaking. You'll need to see a few giraffe before making up your mind on that. They also are hairless at the top of the horns. That is a distinctly male trait. And then you'll have a notice just above the eye to the right and sort of below the horn to the right, you'll notice that there's a protuberance, a growth on its skull. There you go. Yes, this giraffe is just playing so nicely with us. I'm going to suggest we look at something while I'm talking. It's chewing. You're going to see it swallow now. It's going to chew a little bit. You're going to see it swallow in a bit. Watch the throat when it stops chewing. I'll come back to the skull description in a bit. As soon as it stops chewing, watch his throat. You'll notice a bolus of food. Hopefully we'll be able to see it in profile. I'm hoping that the contrast is so good. Let's see. Giraffes are ruminants, just like impala there in the distance. There you go. Let's see if we can see it. And then watch again. It's going to come back up into his mouth. There you go. I wonder if any of you saw that. I definitely got it just on the bottom of the chin. We'll try and get it again just now if we're lucky enough, if this giraffe plays with us. But basically, what that giraffe was doing was swallowing a bolus of food. No, he's not going to play with. Definitely not on our time frame. Swallowed a bolus of food into the first part, the rumen of the tummy, and then regurgitated another ball of food that he would have fed on probably last night, and is in the process of breaking down the particles into ever finer pieces using grinding teeth. What that does is it increases the surface area on any particular piece of vegetation in its tummy, and that allows microbes and bacteria to feed on the plant material, and it helps the giraffe absolutely to be a lot more efficient in extracting nutrients from the available vegetation that it can feed on. So ruminants are very, very good at being very efficient at extracting high quality nutrients from high quality food. And that is a selective feeding habit. You get selective grazers like oryx, for instance, and you get selective browsers like kudu and giraffe, for instance. And they all share a common trait. They're all sharp nosed or sharp faced and have rumens. You're lucky enough to see that. Now, back to the knobs on its head before this giraffe decides to leave us. Male giraffe calcify bone on their heads throughout their lives, and they do that because they fight with their heads. You can imagine having this big, basic, basically like a medieval mace on the end of your neck, and you swing that around with some force, and you can do some damage to your opponent. And the more knobbly your head, the more damage you can inflict on any particular point. It focuses the force. And giraffes will use their heads to butt and bash at each other. And I've even seen giraffe knock each other off their feet. And a lying down giraffe is a submissive, weak giraffe. It's a very vulnerable position for a giraffe to be in. And that is how giraffe will establish a hierarchy amongst themselves, linear hierarchy. The biggest, well, not the oldest, the most mature, healthy, vibrant, biggest giraffe will hold the top of the hierarchy, and those weaker and smaller and less suited will be lower down, and the females will obviously submit to those males easier, and then it just drives sort of the healthiest, best babies, the fit to survive. For those wondering what that antelope in just next to the giraffe is on the left hand side, those are your impala, very common antelope all the way from the Kruger National Park here in South Africa all the way up to Kenya. We're looking at a 5,000 kilometer spread there, 3,500 miles. And here we go, quintessential Pumba walking through the shot. Definitely not as elegant as the two that left us there. The warthog, we'll come back to that in a second. And here's an oryx, an East African oryx. Ella, you commenting on how wild this technology is, and you can't believe that you're looking at this picture coming from Kenya right now. I must be honest with you, I'm flabbergasted by this technology. I absolutely love this format of guiding. The fact that I can guide from multiple areas, sitting where I'm sitting in the Kruger National Park now and sharing it with you all over the world. I don't know where you're sitting at the moment, Ella. Let me know. But have a look at that. We're having a look at the East African oryx, very different from the oryx that we're going to be looking at, hopefully coming out of Akakoyo either today or at another time. Um, Distinct different species, not the same, although they look very similar. And then we've got this warthog drinking at this pan. You can see that dark mane of hair on that warthog. It's the roughest hair. The only thing that comes close to hair as rough as that on the back of a warthog is that on the tail of an elephant. These guys have to be some of the most and today looks like the day of the dove here at Doldonia. Many doves flying in. Just trying to see what doves there are before risking IDing them incorrectly. These warthog will come and drink every day. Now, interestingly, you can sex warthog by looking at their faces. So if we're lucky enough to be able to zoom in a little bit before he runs away, we're going to be looking for warts just below his eyes and just in front of his mouth. And we see if we can see one pair or two pairs. I can see two pairs, 4 warts. So this is a male warthog. Let's come in. The oryx is a different story. It looks like a sheep. And I'm making that judgment from the lack of any notice or protuberance on their belly and those slender horns, relatively speaking. Oop. Got a bit of a fright. This warthog won't stick around for too long. Lions tend. Oh, there's a zebra now as well. Gosh, this African. Oh, excuse me. That was my chair making a noise as I just shifted it further. This African Maldonio pan is really busy. Now we've had giraffe, we've had impala, we've had an oryx, and we've had warthog, and now we've got zebra, and we've got a flock of doves that just keeps on arriving from all over the place. Which I'm going to attempt to identify now. While we have a look at these these zebra. Imagine coming to Africa for the first time and seeing a zebra, or a giraffe for that matter of fact, or a warthog, and then having to go back and explain this to your friends in the pub. Yeah, it looks like a horse, but it's boldly striped black and white. Very smart, fiercely protective. Let's listen for a while and listen at those doves flying in. While we're having a look at zebra drinking and trying to figure out what doves these are, we've had a question come in from a viewer on whether or not there's been any black panthers sighted in this part of Kenya. So 50, to be honest with you, in this particular part of Kenya, I'm not sure. But in Laikipia, which is a couple of 100 kilometers north and west of where we're situated right now, there definitely have been sightings of a black panther. And what a black panther is, it's basically just a melanistic leopard. And I'll explain now exactly what that is. You'll notice on these doves that they've got a black ring just on the back of their necks. We've got 3 doves that have that: the ring-necked dove, the red-eyed dove, and the mourning dove. Now, these are probably not mourning doves. And so they're either the ring-necked dove or they the red-eyed dove. And obviously the difference would be whether or not we could see the red eye. So we'll keep on looking at that while I explain the difference between a normal leopard, a melanistic leopard, and a leucistic leopard. So normal leopard we all know from the pictures that we've seen in magazines and in people's houses, and it's that really golden black colored cat with those striking rosettes all over their body. And I'm sure that most of you have seen a black panther or black leopard, a black jaguar, a black cat that looks like a leopard or a jaguar or mountain lion. And that's a melanistic cat. And what happens is um, it's a genetic, the animals are born with it, it's in their genes, and it's an oversupply in their cells of melanin. And this causes their cells to be saturated with melanin, which is a compound that you find in your bodies, helps us ward off UV, and gives us pigment. And it's saturated their cells, and that's why they come across as black. They will still have the rosettes. In certain light instances, you'll be able to see the patterns on the coat, but they'll be almost completely black. On the other side of the scale, a lack of melanin is called leucism. Leucism, though, is when the coat is very light. We refer to light-colored leopard in this area as strawberry leopard, and they will come out. And when you look at the patterns and rosettes on their coats, but when you contrast it to a normal leopard, it will be much lighter and much more sort of pink in hue. But there is still some melanin present. The nose will be colored, the eyes will be colored, just like the normal leopard and just like the melanistic leopard. And then you get albinism, which is the complete lack of pigment. And that's much rarer than what a leucistic or strawberry leopard and a melanistic or a black leopard is. To find a complete albino in the wild is not an easy thing to do. And they are noticed by having a pink nose, not a black nose, and white eyes. So like an albino would have, a complete lack of pigment. And so there has been a black leopard that has been habituated to people in Laikipia and in one of the game reserves there, and people have been taking the most incredible photographs of this young female. And there have been a couple of others spotted around as well. So 50, to answer your question, I don't know specifically about whether or not Great Plains and Old Doño have a melanistic leopard on this 111,000 hectare, but it's obviously a gene that is active in the meta population of leopard in Kenya, and so there's every expectation that we'd see it. Very similar to how we can possibly see white lion at any point at Djuma, because there's a recessive white lion gene in the meta population of lion in the Western Kruger National Park. And so although it pops up all over the place, I know there's been some white lions popping up around the Nwanetsi concession, which is Western Kruger National Park. There's also been a lot of white lion around Ngala. And so they do pop up all over the place. Not uncommon to see them around Djuma. So yeah, to get back to that particular point, it's really just a matter of when a recessive gene becomes dominant, which requires a special mix of parents carrying a mix of recessive and dominant genes, and it throws up some cubs, which will have normal coats and colored coats, variation of colors, and it just depends on how active. Well, it just depends on how successful those cubs are at becoming adults. And then we start to see them all over the place. I think it's more common than what we give it credit for, but I don't think that the survival rate of either a melanistic leopard or a leucistic leopard is pretty high. I think it's rare because they don't survive that long. On top of the fact that it's a recessive gene, it doesn't get thrown up into dominance very easily or very commonly. Isn't it amazing how all of a sudden this pan has gone quiet, and it's just like it's holding its breath before the next group of animals come in. Over the last 2 days, we've seen about a half an hour to an hour swing in animals, where the local group of animals swing through the water and then move off, and the next group of animals come in. And we've been very lucky over the last 2 days to see giant tusked elephant. And I'm quite excited to see what's going to be happening today. Andrew mentioned yesterday, right at the beginning of the show, that he was very excited to see what was going to happen, and definitely we weren't disappointed. So I think I'm going to take or hazard an educated guess at the doves coming in, that flock that flew in there just now. I think that they are Cape turtle doves. Um, I don't know what that was that just flew in there, but it was much larger than a dove. Um, or the ring-necked dove. It's a very common, one of the smaller of the doves with the rings around its neck. And so that's what my bet's going to be. A seed-eating bird, very common around. It's flying in from all over the place. See, there's a giraffe off in the distance, and interestingly, you know, if you've been watching not just this show, but if you've been watching the Wild Earth shows in general over a long period of time, you'll notice that giraffe actually come and go, and particularly so over the last couple of years. There's been a lot of news and hype around the fact that giraffe populations across the globe or across Africa are declining rapidly. And what this one study seemed to suggest is that with people expansion happening at a rapid rate, it's fragmenting giraffe populations, and they're not as mobile as what they used to be, not as social as they used to be. And this is having a dramatic effect on giraffe numbers all over the world. Well, all over Africa. I keep on saying the world, but they only really occur in Africa. For those of you who might just be joining us, we're at Africam's old Donyo Cam up in Kenya. And what we're looking at there is a Maasai giraffe busy browsing on a bush. Not sure exactly what that is. It looks like some form of Diospirus or Gymnosporia. It's difficult to actually ascertain. But what you can say is that I was actually going to say what you can say. It's easy. You can just see it's a male giraffe, but I'm not so sure anymore. At this distance, um, what we can see is that the skull is fairly robust and that the horn is fairly robust, but I'm just not seeing the bald spot on top of all those distinct skull protuberances behind the ears, above the eye, and along the bridge of the nose. And if we look further down the belly, between the back legs and on the tummy, the resolution on my camera is just, or my screen is just enough for me to say that it looks to be enough evidence there to suggest that this is a male giraffe. There's another giraffe coming in. Now, giraffe form a metapopulation, which is the number of giraffe in any particular area, not limited to a game reserve or to this area, that interact with one another or can interact with one another, share genetic material over time. And giraffe do form these loose associations or herds with each other, and they will come and go. So these herds will form up for a while, and then they'll disband, and members of this herd will form up with a different herd, and you'll see them all over the place. But what's happening with humans, numbers expanding, and with kraal sizes expanding, is that we're fragmenting these populations, and it's getting more and more difficult for giraffe to move between populations. And as a result, we're seeing a drastic decline in their numbers in some areas. Some places, the giraffe populations have actually increased dramatically. And that is all thanks to people just realizing, hey, what's happening with these giraffes? Now, interestingly, male giraffe fight using their heads. We were just discussing that a little bit earlier. They swing their heads at each other and they bash each other around. And the strongest giraffe, or the giraffe that are better able to fight, are the ones that end up making the majority of the babies for that season. And what we can say is that there's an evolutionary drive, therefore, for a giraffe with longer and more bulbous heads. And I don't know, it's up to you to decide, where does this story stop? But it'll be quite funny to see giraffes with ever increasing neck lengths over the years and ever more bulbous heads. And where does it stop? I suppose it stops when it starts to become an environmental challenge or a hazard to have an extra long neck and a bulbous head. This giraffe looks like it's coming in to drink, and with it approaching the camera, we will get a better idea of whether this is a male or a female. Still think it's a young male, but let's see. That middle giraffe looks a bit darker than the giraffe on the left and the right, and that's because you do get slight variations in coloration. They can actually be quite profound, but generally there's a color variation. You get dark giraffe, and you get light giraffe, or brunette giraffe and blonde giraffe. We are going to be treated to something. We are going to have a particularly special treat now watching this giraffe try and attempt to drink. Because they're so short, relatively speaking, and so tall, they've got a very specific stance, and it's dangerous for them to go down. Watch this, watch it. He's going to bend his knees now. Goodness, that is really special to see. And when he's finished drinking, he's going to flick his head up and spray a whole bunch of water. Very vulnerable position for that giraffe to be in. Can you imagine trying to get water up that neck? There you go. Might come down for another drink. Whole bunch of oryx coming down to join the giraffe. Doesn't seem like he's perturbed whatsoever. Not stopping him from drinking. Let me keep quiet for a little bit and we can hear what's happening. This is so special, having all of these animals drinking at the same time. Lovely shot, that. Great view of these zebras' tails just swishing from side to side. They look like so many windscreen wipers on a windshield. Classic. What a quintessentially African picture that. Gosh, those horns of those oryx are sharp. Now, to give you an idea of the relative size of these animals, the oryx and the zebra are roughly the same size, the zebra having a slight weight advantage. And the giraffe, you're looking at about 5 meters tall. You, as a 6-foot human being, you'll be able to walk straight underneath the belly of a giraffe, to give you an idea of how big that animal is. And standing 15 feet tall at the top of its head. With the giraffe and the oryx weighing in at around 200 to 250 kilograms for a full-grown male, which is around about 500 pounds. Oh gosh, that zebra is so pregnant. The one that just walked away. Just talking about digestive systems, we were touching on briefly the fact that the oryx and the giraffe share the same type of digestive system. They're ruminants, with the only difference being that the oryx eats grass and the giraffe eats leaves. But the zebra and the oryx have, although they share eating grass, they have distinctly different digestive systems in that the is a hindgut fermenter or a bulk grazer. So the oryx needs quite specific, high value grass, high protein grass. And so the bush that it lives in needs to be undisturbed, whereas the zebra can live on a much broader range of grass and can deal with much lower quality grass because they can process larger volumes of grass over any given time. And that's also the reason it gives them that bloated look. They need a large rumen to deal with the volume of grass, and it also produces a large amount of gas, which blows them up a little bit. It's always been a bit of a challenge for me to decide whether or not oryx are male or female. I find that the female's horns are, gosh, what's this one doing going on to? Weird. You see how accurate they are with their horn jousting like that. So one decided to flick out one of those rapier sharp horns, and the other one countered it neatly by just blocking the thrust. And you hear stories of oryx being able to deflect stones that are chucked at them and impale lions that are trying to prey on them, but I personally haven't seen it before. But my partner has seen an oryx fend off some predators for quite some time, having reversed itself up a termite mound, as far as my memory serves me, and fighting off these, I think there were some lions or hyena. Anyway, a large predator, fighting off the large predator for some time before succumbing to them, just using those horns. Crazy. As expected, this particular round of animals has come in, had their drink, and is now moving off. anticipation for what's coming next is actually quite nice. For those in the know, interestingly, the oryx are able to see the point of their horns, very similar to how a kudu, funnily enough, can also see the point of their horn. Aim with their horn tips and are very accurate in being able to place their horns. Um, but what happens with oryx when they're confronted by predators? They reverse up a slope or reverse with their hindquarters into a thorny bush, present the sharp end forward, and then bash their horns on the floor and kicking up dust and making a bit of a fuss and just trying to make themselves look as scary as possible. I, for one, certainly wouldn't tackle a gemsbuck or an oryx horn forward. I think that just a prick of those will be enough to go through your chest cavity, and notwithstanding the fact that the animal pushing that is weighing in at 500 pounds. Here we have the next herd of zebra. Let's hear what they're going to sound like around this pen. I don't have sound coming from this pan from where I'm sitting, but I would imagine that the splashing and the noise of the zebra is actually quite nice to listen to. There's a lot of them splashing around in the water now. And they can get quite irate with one another, making all these high-pitched screams and noises while they lash out at each other just trying to get a drink. Oh, yes, a yellow. The largest of the African antelope. Goodness, we spoiled here at this pan today. What an absolute treat having this many zebra in Afrikaans or Borneo Pan here in southern Kenya today. Confounding the eyes with their stripy patterns. And there's just something about stripes for the human eye that does something to your ability to pick out any individual. For a long time, I just thought that that was one of the reasons why zebra have evolved these stripes. I'd be lucky enough maybe to see this eland coming down. Oh, there you go. It's opened up and we get to watch. There, have a drink. Give you an idea, they're about double the size of a zebra. Gosh, we are treated to an absolute wonder here today. What's happening? They're noticing something. All their heads are coming up. There's something there that just off to the left-hand side, which is alerted them. Could be some more animals coming in. Could be something in the distance. Definitely nothing scaring them enough to move off. Gives those eland a little bit of a fright. Some more zebra coming in. As we were mentioning, because movement of zebra and these contrasting colors, especially black and white, are actually quite confusing for the human eye to follow. It was for a long time believed that this was an anti-predator behavior or anti-predator characteristic, which confounded lions or hyena hunting them out, inhibiting their ability to select any particular individual. And while I do think that there is some merit to that, in that when you've got a large number of milling animals, it is sometimes difficult to pick out an individual. You see it with hunting birds and flocks of quelea, for instance, or large predatory fish in shoals. It definitely doesn't seem to be the case of why zebra have stripes. Of the 7 equids in the world, 3 of them have stripes. They all occur in Africa. And in the areas where they occur, you have a deadly biting fly, or a fly that carries a deadly disease, a biting fly that carries a deadly disease more accurately, called the tsetse fly. And there's a marked difference in the amount of tsetse flies that will land on zebra because of the stripy pattern than what will land on that eland, for instance. And so it's thought currently by scientists that rather than any type of anti-predator characteristic or some form of thermoregulation or heat regulation, body heat regulation, that these equids have evolved this boldly patterned coat as a fly deterrent. And one of our viewers noted 2 days ago that they're now horse blankets with stripes on, and he bought one for his horse and he put it on his horse, and the amount of flies, biting flies he noticed on his horse reduced dramatically. The oldest indigenous tribe in Africa are the San, Khoisan, or two distinct peoples as far as I understand, but form some of the oldest of the African tribes, or the tribes of the longest lineage in Africa. And their most venerated, their most spiritual animal is the eland. They hold it in such high regard. Janet, you wanting to know if Kenya's still in drought? It's a good question there, Janet. I don't actually know. I'm going to need to do a little bit of research to find out if that's the case. Kenya, it's a difficult country to determine whether it's in drought or not, because they don't have winter and summer. They have dry seasons and wet seasons, and sometimes the dry seasons can last a little bit longer than what is anticipated, and crops start to fail and people's livelihoods start to be impaired. But it's not really a drought, as in how we would say that it's a drought. It's just dry for a longer period, and that's called a drought. Um, but I stand corrected, and so I'm going to be looking and seeing over the next couple of minutes exactly what is happening with the rainfall patterns in Kenya, and I'll absolutely get back to you with that one, Janet. So the San peoples, they used to hold the eland as their most spiritual animal. In fact, it features in four of their most prominent rituals. Um, it features when a boy has his first kill, and girls go through puberty, marriage, and even some trances. Um, and in it, they venerate the fat of the eland above all else. And you can see that dewlap and that glossy coat is testimony to that. Now, as James is often want to say, animal fat in the animal kingdom amongst the wildlife is very hard to come by, and it's a great source of energy. But it is a difficult commodity to come by. It's very difficult to obtain if you are living off the land, especially land like this that you're seeing in the background, and to hold onto your organs. Eland have the ability to hold it around their heart and in their dewlap. And of course, the San peoples would have known this. But to hunt a giant antelope like this, which can weigh upwards of 1,000 kilograms, it's 2,000 pounds, with simple bows and arrows, is a very difficult thing. That is such a great view. Wow. That stroppy oryx came in there and I chased them away. There still seems to be some disturbance off to the left. I would imagine that it's something making its way through the brush. Wow, they're nervous of this particular oryx. And here we have a true African giant. Male African elephant came in here with some conviction. Thirsty. Everything else made way. He gets first choice at the sweetest water. Not as big as the elephant we've seen over the last couple of days, but the big, really big elephants seem to come in a little bit later in the morning, or at least in the last 2 days that I've been manning these cameras. Obviously, that's not a long enough period to actually determine what's happening, but that seems to be the short-term pattern right now. See if you can hear him sucking up the water there. Listen carefully. They can actually generate quite a lot of force in their trunk. Brenda, you and I share exactly the same thing at the moment. You're saying that the scene is putting a huge smile on your face, massive smile on your face. And so, no, I'm sharing that with you, Brenda. Today, just the whole rotation of animals around this pan has been something incredible. Just wonder after wonder. Now, Elephants don't like to drink dirty water. We've mentioned that over the last couple of days as well, but you can see testimony to that right now with this fantastic view from this Africam camera. If any of you are new to where we are right now, we're in Old Donyo, which is an enormous conservation area in southern Kenya on the Tanzanian border, close to Amboseli National Park. And this bull elephant, I'm assuming he's relatively old just because his temples above his eyes are so shrunken, and he's solitary, but he's not an old man. He's a mature bull. He hasn't got that big tusks, but he's a big boy. And he's busy sucking up water there from this particular point, because for him that's the cleanest water that he can find. extending his trunk way below the level of his feet, sucking up water into that first sort of third, cupping it quickly so it doesn't run out, and then blowing it into his mouth. Listen carefully to it gushing down his throat. Now, the fact that his ears are spread wide isn't necessarily a sign that he's angry at all. He uses his ears to capture sound, but also he does use it to make himself look bigger. In fact, 2/3 bigger. No, something is definitely not. Let's watch his tail. His tail's still hanging straight. If his tail cocks to the side, it's a sign subconsciously that he's not happy, but I think it's just the general hubbub around a pan like this. His tail goes, swishes out. No, still he's fine. Now, yesterday we noticed that this big bull elephant raised his head really high and was trying to determine the source of a disturbance. And I noted that elephants get very big very quickly. They can make themselves look very big very quickly by lifting their head above, not quite above their shoulders, but much higher than it is. So just imagine this elephant lifts his head up above his shoulders there, exposing his chest. He'll get a third bigger, tall-wise, and then opening his ears at you. There you go. He's now just increased the frontal view by 2/3. And you can see why elephant becomes so intimidating so quickly when you're standing in front of them, is they can very suddenly increase their overall look massively. And that, for most things, is a clear indication to create distance. Don't stand in front of elephant. They are incredibly dangerous animals. Very clever, very strong, very fast. Now you'll notice that this elephant's tusks are not symmetrical. They are symmetrical in, I would say, general shape and size. So their lip circumference seems like it's the same, and the way that they're shaped coming out of the face or out of the skull seems similar, but that one is slightly shorter than the other. And that is because elephants show a dimorphism in which tusk they enjoy using when they're feeding, and also how they pick up grass. So they'll either wrap their trunk left or right around grass, and they will use a particular tusk to help them feed. So around branches and leaves, they will use a particular tusk or have a habit of using one tusk or the other, and that wears that particular tusk down. And I'm still trying to decide whether or not this tusk is that. You can see that sharp chisel front there. I think it might well be his, what they call a slave tusk, a tusk that's used more than the other one for feeding, or whether or not this tusk was actually broken off, possibly in a fight or feeding on a particularly hard tree. The tusks do chip and shatter sometimes. It's hard to say. It looks like it is broken. And then the left-hand tusk, the longer one, you can see that there's a slight notch, and that's called a feeding notch. And what he'll do is he'll use his tusk to put underneath grass, and then use his trunk to he'll lift up the grass like a wedge, like a pitching fork, and the grass will then hook in that ridge or that groove, and it'll be easier for him to lift up his their head and break the grass and eat it, but it does form a groove there. And so here's my prediction. I think that this elephant broke off his right hand tusk, or the one that's shorter, and feeds with his left hand tusk, or the one that's longer, depending on what orientation you are, I suppose. The longer tusk is his one that he uses to feed with grass. His right hand tusk he broke off, probably fighting. Something is not making this elephant happy. Not unhappy enough to move off. Definitely doesn't look like he's at ease. But I'm just watching that tail. Second he cocks that tail or lifts up his head, opens up his ears, lifts up his trunk above the level of his head. We know that something is coming. We're busy watching this bull elephant, very specifically taking water from a specific source here. I've got a feeling that this is a pumped pan. In other words, it's an artificial water source. It's not a natural water source, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with artificial water sources. Man's expansion into these wilderness areas has fragmented even massive wilderness areas like this, of way over 200,000 acres, into blocks. And we've had to provide alternative water sources to the animals living in these places. And so there's nothing wrong with an artificial water source. But elephants are such good investigators of where the best water comes from and don't like any dirty water. And you probably found that this elephant is just sucking up the water coming straight out of the outlet pipe, and is quite happy to just wait for the water to fill up his trunk and then suck it up and put it in. Oh, here's a giraffe coming in from the right. Gosh. Hey, big guy. Interestingly, an elephant can still feed higher up a tree than a giraffe can, even though some giraffes can reach 6 meters tall. An elephant won't stand nearly that tall at the shoulder. They go to about 3.5 meters at the shoulder. And even if they lift their trunk up, it'd still be slightly shorter than some giraffe. But elephants can obviously push the tree down, break off branches with their tusks and their trunks, and then in extreme cases, they can even rest on their back legs and stand on their back legs to reach up high. And so do feed higher than what giraffe can feed. All right. So you notice that we just left the elephant and the giraffe at Kenya's old Donyo pan. And that was because we got a few gremlins coming out of that location, which is freezing the picture a little bit. And we've moved us over a couple of thousand kilometers west to Etosha National Park in Namibia, where you can see a completely different landscape to what we were just looking at now, and some new animals to look at as well. What we've got in the foreground are some springbok, and I'm still trying to see what it is we're looking at in the background there. The resolution on my camera is not, or sorry, on my screen isn't good enough for me to make a definitive call on what that is. It's definitely brown and it's large, and they look like eland, which I'm almost certain that they are. So another herd of Cape eland, and they've just finished drinking and are moving off. Both of these antelope that you're looking at now, both the massive eland and the springbuck, are both grazers. They both eat grass. And I don't know if it strikes you, but I don't see a lot of grass around this pan, and yet the number of animals in Etosha is staggering. It just goes to show that you don't need a lot to keep animals going. It just needs to be an intact, whole environment, healthy environment, and Mother Nature sorts itself out. So the wind in Etosha is blowing today. It's actually been increasing in not only how frequent it's blowing, so becoming a sustained gust, but also the wind speed is increased as well. Let's have a look and see what the weather's doing right now. It's a chilly, chilly day in Etosha today, much colder than it's been the last couple of days. We're looking at around about 64 degrees Fahrenheit right now and 18 degrees centigrade, which is about 3 or 4 degrees colder, but the wind is massively up. It's 27 kilometers an hour at the moment, 17 miles an hour, and that's not fun at all. There you go. Now we can see that they're definitely Cape eland. I heard of them. With some giraffe in the foreground. Oh gosh, look at me. Zebra in the foreground. And an oryx that's just come out of the bush. If you've been with us since the beginning of the show, you may remember that right in the beginning, the first oryx that we saw, I said, was different to these oryx that we might see around Okokweyo in Namibia. So East Africa or Kenya, where Africam's Aldonyo camera is, and the Etosha cam, well, Okokweyo camera here in Etosha National Park, are on different sides of the African continent, separated by a couple of thousand miles of land. This is obviously a desert, semi-desert on the edge of one of the world's largest salt pans, and Aldonyo is situated in mixed woodland. And although you find oryx in both places, this is a western oryx, and what we are looking at is an eastern oryx. Looks the same, but two different populations completely. Whereas the zebra are the same. They share very similar genetics. Isn't that interesting? Just as a reminder, as you've noticed from time to time, I'm answering viewers' questions. You are also welcome to send me questions. You just need to visit WildEarth's website and register there, and you'll be able to send questions through to our control team, who will then send them on to me to answer to the best of my ability. Goodness, and we spoiled for choice today. We are going to be making a jump instantaneously, a couple of thousand kilometers away. Again, we're going to be visiting Jamala, where there's a surprise for us. Now, this is Africam's Jamala Cam. This is in Madekwe Game Reserve, which is the fourth largest game reserve in South Africa. So we've come from East Africa to northern Namibia and into northern South Africa, but on the Botswana border this time. And what you're looking at there is a herd of Cape buffalo. And you've got an enormous bull. This is this left of center, left and right of center. The one in the center of the screen is a bull buffalo, one of Africa's big five. But he's definitely not a prime bull. You can see that bull off further left. He's busy. He's got a weird pose. He's got his head up and his top lip out. That's called the Flehmen grimace. And that's what happens when a prime bull urine tests a female for hormone levels. He's got these glands in the top of his mouth and the roof of his mouth, which flare open, and he passes, generally speaking, urine over those glands. And it's so sensitive that his body is able to tell whether or not that female is about to approach estrus, in which case he will fight off other males who will be vying for her attention. Eventually he will be allowed to mate with her, and she will then carry that calf for 11 months before dropping it. You can see that her calf next to her is relatively old. I would imagine that she's ready to conceive another baby. That calf is almost ready to be weaned. There's a beautiful looking buffalo, that's for sure. Big, thick neck, huge shoulders. Cape buffalo and eland weigh almost the same. These guys always remind me of sort of wrestlers, I suppose. Huge, or boxers, big, thick, very strong animals. Whereas the eland remind me more of, I don't know, what would be shot put, someone who's very tall and enormous, but you don't really realize they're that big until you stand next to them. We've got some zebra coming in. Interestingly, when those zebra get a little bit closer, I'd like you to notice that these zebra, the ones that we found south of the Limpopo River, all carry a different stripe pattern. They have a shadow stripe. So other than the zebra that we saw in Etosha and at Oldonyo in Kenya, the southern zebra have an additional stripe between their black and white stripe. You can see it on the zebra on the right hand side. You'll notice that there's, just especially on the rump, you'll notice there's a thin dark shadow stripe, and that is typical of zebra south of the Zambezi River and Limpopo rivers. You don't find that north of those two rivers. These are all male buffalo standing in front of us. No females left. The herd has moved on. Something spooked them. These buffalo will carry on with their wanderings. They've now come and watered, and will carry on, probably go and find a place where they lie up in the shade, chew the cud from their morning feed, and spend the midday just lazing about. You can expect something else to come out of the bushes. You can see the zebra listening intently. Let's see what's going to come out of these bushes. Probably more zebra if I were to hazard a guess, but you never know. That's the thing with these African pans. Could be anything from a jackal to a herd of elephant. Such a privilege having these water holes live, and especially at this time of the year. And the reason for that is that as we approach the deepest part of our dry season, um, the temperatures are going to start increasing. Food resources close to these pans and permanent water sources is going to become limited to non existent. And these animals are going to have to move further and further afield to find food. And then eventually they won't be able to find food and they'll need to just while they wait for the rains to come. And so activity around these water holes is just going to increase. So remember to clear your schedules during these live at the waterhole shows because I guarantee you that action and activity leading into and through October are going to be unbelievable. And then, of course, the excitement of watching the clouds build up on the horizon in the afternoon, waiting for those first rains to come. Yeah, here comes some more zebra out of the bush. And so now answered the question, what were these zebra looking at? Definitely another herd of zebra coming out of the bush. All right, so we're having a few gremlins here as well, and we can't give you the ambient noises coming from this waterhole, but we're going to go and see what action we've got at Tau. This is the, this is the African Tau camp, also still in Madikwe, so also still in that great reserve up in northern South Africa on the Botswana border. And immediately apparent is the two crocodiles. Yeah, I found out that there are five crocodiles here. And they were brought in, so they didn't wander in here naturally. They were brought in when the reserve was established. Um, Madikwe Reserve is a marvel of modern conservation in that it was re-established as a wilderness area as opposed to, say, the Kruger Park, who's always been a wilderness area that's just been conserved. Madikwe is a true modern conservation success story. But interestingly, as far as I'm aware, these crocodile haven't managed to rear a single clutch of eggs. That the eggs always get raided, or the eggs in the nests always get raided, and all the eggs are destroyed and eaten, and the babies eaten. So this population hasn't got any bigger at this particular pan since they were brought in. And we have a grey heron. That's the tall bird with the big neck. We have a few other birds which I haven't managed to identify just yet. Look like some form of duck or goose, either white-faced or they're on the left-hand side or Egyptian. And then we've got some moorhens on the right-hand side, black bodies with their white faces. Fairly characteristic. That heron would be patiently waiting. It's actually quite deep there because that heron's legs are quite long for any sign of movement and then spear down rapidly with its beak to snare up a frog or a fish or a grasshopper or anything that sort of wanders close to it. These crocodile would predominantly be feeding on fish. Crocodile actually do scavenge, so anything that dies close to this pan, you've got a fairly good chance that these crocodile will make an attempt to steal it. So if lions, for instance, set up camp on the borders on the forest fringes of this pan, waiting for food to come to them and make a kill, it's it's every expectation that these crocodile will come out and try and scavenge that kill from them. Yeah, those duck definitely look like white-faced or whistling duck. And then let's watch this grey heron and see what it does. I doubt that these crocodile will be very active today. It is a cold winter's day in Madikwe. Let's find out what the temperature is doing here. We can contrast it to what we found at Altonio in Kenya and Namibia. I'm just going to go and look at the weather quickly while you watch this heron do its thing. So currently it's a chilly 14 degrees, which is in the 60s Fahrenheit, half the wind speed that we had at Namibia in Etosha. So the wind is not blowing nearly as hard as what it is in Etosha. This heron is not. He's got some bee in its bonnet. He's setting himself up at a different area. That bird that just flapped up in the top of your screen, that's a blacksmith lapwing. Fairly common bird around these wetland areas. You'll notice a slight shake on the camera. Don't be disturbed. That's only because we zoomed in so that we could see this heron properly, and even though I said the wind isn't blowing that hard, it is still blowing at 16 kilometers an hour, which is enough to shake the camera at the zoom. I'm just thankful that we can bring you these pictures live and interactive from one of the best wilderness areas in the country at the moment. This crocodile. Gosh, they are terrifying things. Cold blooded, so it's busy lying, presenting the widest possible surface area to the sun, and just using the sun to increase its metabolism so it can stay alive basically and digest whatever food it's digesting. Let's see what bird this is that we've got now. There you go. It's great that we can zoom these cameras in. I apologize for the shake, but like I said, it's actually just great that we've got a camera that can do this, and it is a windy day, so no harm done. See that tail flicking up there? Now, interestingly, the reserve, Madikwe Game Reserve, stretches over 75,000 hectares, and I did say that it was the fourth largest, but it's actually the fifth largest game reserve in South Africa, excuse me, so I suppose there's some debate there. But importantly, it occupies the transition zone between the Kalahari thornveld and Savannah bushveld, which is important because the Kalahari thornveld has its particular set of animals, and the Savannah bushveld has its, and there's an overlap here, which means that you can get to see animals that you wouldn't necessarily see here, then you wouldn't necessarily see anywhere else, but you can see here together. It's also a great place to see wild dog, cheetah, and of course any number of bird species. Great for birding, actually. Interestingly, that little moorhen that we're seeing having a bath there, have a look at what it's doing there. Off to the right hand side of your screen, feeds on grass and insects. The whole morning we've been discussing how zebra just eat grass and are bulk feeders, and oryx eat grass but are very specific high protein feeders, and giraffe feed on specifically, um, you know, they browse on leaves. And it's all very clear. This species eats just leaves, and that one eats just grass, and predators eat meat, and herbivores eat vegetation. But this particular bird eats both. So it eats both a selection of insects, which is animal protein, obviously, and grasses and sedges. As we discount the fact that or crocodile at least are carnivores, only eat meat. But this little bird that we're looking at here now eats both vegetation and meat protein, very similar to humans, so omnivorous. It's just one of those things that you got to ask yourself the question: where did this bird evolve from that was needed at some point? I really do love the scientific names of animals when they make sense. I don't like to just sprout these things just because it makes me sound clever, but I'm not. I don't remember any of these words. Well, not many of them, at least, anyway. But this particular bird, this genus is Gallinula, um, and it means small hen. And if you have a look at the profile of this bird, in particular when you're viewing it at the distance that we're at, don't you think it looks like a small hen? That tail that flicks out, and what it's doing now, beak profile. So the general impression of its size and shape at some makes it look like a small hen. I love it when these names absolutely describe what we're looking at. Now, Lenny, you've been interested by this crocodile, and you want to know how many eggs do crocodiles lay at any given time. And Lenny, these Nile crocodiles will lay anywhere sort of between 50 and 70 eggs at a time, but it all depends on the health of the crocodile. But what's also interesting about these crocodiles is that the sex of the Male versus female crocodiles are determined by the temperature of the eggs in the nest, um, with slightly warmer temperatures, I think, making males, and slightly cooler temperatures making females. But I'm just trying to figure out exactly which one it is for you. So, Lenny, sure, I'm glad that I was right there. You've got to check these things before you sprout out knowledge like this. But absolutely, the sex of the crocodile's eggs are determined by the temperature that the eggs are incubated at. With cooler eggs making females, so around about 30 degrees centigrade, and warmer eggs um, making males, so around about 34 degrees centigrade. And so, interestingly, that isn't determined in the mother's uterus. It's determined externally by the temperature that the eggs are incubated at inside the nest in the bank of this pan. Now, as terrifying as what these crocodiles are, they're very vulnerable when they're small. They're only about as long as your forearm when they're born and tiny. And although the mother does have some maternal instincts, she'll actually look after the babies, not only helping them out their eggs and into the water, but also looking after them for a while. Um, they definitely do fall prey to other crocodiles. Other other crocodiles will eat baby crocodiles, not their mother, of course. Birds, lots of birds, including that heron that you see in the top right hand corner, will eat baby crocodiles. Nile monitor lizards, which are, you know, like smaller lizards than the crocodiles, not as big as Komodo dragons, obviously, but definitely the longest lizard that we found out here, growing to about sort of 6 to 7 feet long. They will dig up and eat baby crocodiles, any number of predators that hang around these pans. So, jackal, even leopard will prey on baby crocodiles. Not that many crocodiles actually make it to adulthood. What you're looking at here, sunning itself on the bank, is a success story, actually. So what we're having a look at here is obviously a crocodile trying to act as a stump on the far left. And then we've got a real stump with some birds busy just resting out of out of the well in the sun. They are a pair of Egyptian geese. And then we have two more birds with their backs to us. I'm battling to see what that is. And then off right in the bottom right hand corner, we've got a three banded plover. A very active bird. They never sit still. Isn't it amazing at how much that crocodile resembles a stump, even though it's outside the water? Can you imagine what that crocodile will resemble if it was inside muddy water? It's just its eyes sticking out the top. Now, interestingly, these Egyptian geese are of a relative size. They're fairly large. They're fairly large members of the duck or goose family, one of the largest. Another one of relatively similar size is a knob-billed duck, which you see in summertime. Quite distinctive characteristic, a little bit smaller than the Egyptian geese. But my partner, who used to work in Madikwe for many years as a field guide, has seen fish eagles busy catching knob-billed ducks. So not the ducks that we're looking at right now, but ducks of a similar size. And if you think about that, for those of you that know much about fish eagles or the American bald eagle, for instance, we always see them catching fish. So they tend to swoop down and catch fish that will be on the surface of the water. They're not known for taking birds, particularly birds in flight. And yet the fish eagles that hang around this particular dam are known to take ducks of the size of the Egyptian goose we were looking at, just smaller, in flight around this dam, which I find fascinating. It shows you that there's a need for these birds, these predators, to adapt their strategies, even if it goes against their nature, to to make the best of whatever available prey source is around. Definitely not giving us much of a show today. Heads tucked in, absorbing the sun, probably out of the wind for the most part. Two pairs of birds. And then the three-banded courser, plover, and they're just exiting the bottom of the screen there, just on its usual ceaseless foray. There we've had an interesting question from a viewer. Are now crocodiles able to survive in salt water, from Felt Orca? Gosh, that's an interesting name. Felt Orca. Felt is another word for savanna, and orca is obviously the killer whales. And so it's an interesting name that you got there for yourself. But let's get back to the question. So, can the Nile crocodile that we're looking at here, living in Madikwe, very, very far away from the sea, be transported to the sea, and could you let it go and could it survive fine? And the answer to that question is yes. They don't generally like to live in saltwater, but can they survive in saltwater for some time? Have they been seen in saltwater? 100%. Absolutely. It's quite common to hear tales of Nile crocodiles found in northern Zululand, um, which is in South Africa on the eastern coast in the Indian Ocean. For Nile crocodiles to be found sunning themselves on the beaches and not quite frolicking around in the waves, but definitely seen in the shallower waters. And then fishermen have found Nile crocodiles swimming around off the coast as well. But predominantly they are freshwater and found in freshwater. And we were just with some zebra as we were panning out looking at the fringes of this pan. For those of you just joining us, this is Africam's Tau pan, which is in Madikwe Game Reserve, South Africa, on the Botswana border, but in South Africa. An incredible reserve, one of conservation's true success stories. Um, Most places, unfortunately, only become relevant after the fact, after we realize that what we've done has potentially broken them. This was never broken, it was all just farmland. That was then repopulated with animals and is now an absolutely thriving wilderness area. You can see the extent of this pan's area. In summertime, runoff from the hills that you see there in the background will make its way down the slopes and into this pan and will fill it up substantially. And then the movement of countless thousands of feet over the course of a dry season will trample and compact the soil and prohibit a large portion of that vegetation that you see from coming close to the water's edge. And then, of course, close to the water's edge, as you can see on this beach, basically close to the water, that's where you're going to find the most feet. And of course, it gets this powdery consistency and it's actually quite soft on the feet. And there, coming into view, we've got a thicket on the edge of the pan. This is a prime place to look for predators of any number of sorts: cheetah, wild dog, lion, leopard, snakes, jackal, number of birds. Those basket-like nests that you're looking at there, center screen now, are from weavers. They weave them every single season. Males will weave the nests for the females and present them to the females. If she doesn't like it, she rips them up. And you can see what looks like an old nest, sort of left of center. You'll notice some scraggly grass stuck in the trees. That's probably what's left of an old nest from last year. And these poor guys have to start all over again, impress the ladies. There's a zebra top right, but it's okay. We're going to keep on panning and see what we can see. It's such an adventure, busy panning around a dam like this, just investigating exactly what's there. You never know what's going to come into screen or not. And don't forget, this is live. This is coming to, I'm seeing this in as much a real time as you are at the moment. And right now, it is 11:22 a.m. on, I think it's Tuesday today. Tuesday. Gosh, one of my days. Tuesday, the 8th of, oh, sorry, the 1st of August. Gosh. Center screen now, just to the left of that thicket, we're seeing another blacksmith lapwing. A bird quite often associated with these pans and these open areas adjacent to pans, and has even been known to take the fleshy bits and parasites from crocodiles. There seems to be a bit of a symbiotic relationship there. It's called commensalism, where both species benefit by the relationship. The bird getting access to food that would otherwise be uncompeted for, and the crocodile getting some oral hygiene as part of the deal and not eating the bird. But the benefit of having multiple cameras across different locations all over Africa is that we can move from one to another with some freedom. Why don't we go and have a look at Africam's old Donyo camera up in Kenya? We're going to be jumping a couple of thousand kilometers north into East Africa at the flick of a switch. Goodness me, look at that. So we've got some elephants here. I'm just busy having a quick scan to see if this is a breeding herd, in other words, females, youngsters, or whether it's a bachelor herd, all males. And I'm pretty confident to say that this is all males. This is a bachelor herd of elephant. This isn't an established herd like a breeding herd would be sisters, children, cousins that stick together. This would be a loose association of bulls that sort of are just hanging around with each other for some camaraderie. You might find that there's a young elephant there. The one at the back there looks like a youngster hanging around with an old elephant. One just left of center. And they learn from them. They learn what to do. Not welcome. That youngster must wait his turn. I'm totally surprised at the length of the tusks of these bull elephant that we're seeing coming to these pans late morning. Really incredible. Definitely that youngster is not welcome. You can see that the old guy, the guy there at the back center, he's drinking from the same spot that that other elephant was drinking at a little bit earlier. The freshest water goes to him. And everyone else must either just wait their turn or make do with the water that's in the pan already. That youngster got his trunk in there, having his trunk lifted away quite gently. The zebra is just patiently waiting their turn. We'll keep quiet for a while and see if we can just listen to the sounds of these elephants slurping up their almost midday drink. These bulls all look like they are breeding age, barring that one big guy there at the back who might be a little bit past it, but these all look like elephant that would easily be able to fight for the sort of rights to cover a female. And that youngster that we're seeing in the back is a little bit too young. What might also be happening is there could be a female in estrus in the area. She would be coming into estrus over a period of time, and her body's hormonal changes will be irresistible to most male elephant in the area, and she will be giving off signs that she's ready to mate in advance of her body actually ovulating and be ready to conceive. And what that does is it gives the biggest elephant in the region time to get to her and to fight for the right to mate with her. She wants the strongest, best bull elephant in the area at the time she ovulates to cover her. That's what she wants. And she needs to give time for that process, that hierarchy to establish itself, and for her then to make sure that she's got the best choice available at the time that her body's ready. And what you find is that you get these groups of bull elephant like coming out of the bush and joining one another, following around these herds. And what may have happened is that these guys have been kicked away from the breeding herd by an even bigger bull. And I mean, we've seen some enormous bull elephant at this particular location in Kenya. And I would imagine that although these guys are magnificent, and while they may stand a chance if there was no bigger elephant in the area, as they are mature bulls, there may very well be a bigger bull covering the herd. And he's just left these guys to come to the pub and talk about the good old days or what they're going to do. I suppose very similar to human boys at a pub, right? Now, these elephants will very quickly deplete the water in this pan, and it'll take some time for it to fill up again. I think the zebra need to get in there before it's finished. Each of these elephants will be able to drink 200 liters of water from this pan with no problem at all, which should take it down to just a muddy seep, basically. I doubt that they do that in this particular case. Kenya isn't like Etosha, where water sources are few and far between. Um, there's even a story in Etosha where elephants walked 80 kilometers to get to a water source, a permanent water source, as documented. Kenya thankfully has a few more water sources, although I still haven't confirmed whether Kenya's in drought or not. I need to do that while we are back at Africam's Aldonia Pan. Yeah, Great Plains Conservation. Give me one sec, let me see. While you listen to these elephant drink, let me see if I can find something out about the drought. Interestingly, I don't know if you're noticing that there seems to be some butterflies, some white butterflies that are moving through the shot right now. Let's, over the next couple of days, take a note and see if we notice more of these butterflies. There's a migration across Africa of a butterfly species called the brown-veined white. And these butterflies number in their billions and migrate across Africa. And I'm wondering if this isn't the first of them that we're seeing. Definitely they weren't here yesterday. There might be a single occurrence of a different species of butterflies, but let's just keep a lookout and see if we don't notice an increase in these butterflies' activity over the next couple of days and weeks. Now, these zebra won't come in, I don't think, and drink while these elephants are here. I think, well, they don't mind an elephant or two. Having 5 elephants in such close proximity is not something that they'd want. These big guys are definitely dominating this pan at the moment. Let's see what you're going to do. She looks quite pregnant, this zebra mare in front of us. They really do look like they're going to pop when they're pregnant. They get enormous. I feel sorry for them. Marilla Shortcake, you've made an interesting observation that I must say I've noticed, similar to you, that the tusks seem to be bigger than the Ellies and the Kruger. Um, so there is an interesting fact around the elephant in this area, which is the Amboseli area of Kenya. That's the national park. We're not in the national park, but we're very close to it. We're in the Great Plains Conservation Area, um, which is very close by. But as far as I know, that there are more great tuskers in Amboseli than there are in the Kruger, but the record for the longest tusk still goes to of having the longest tusked bulls on average still goes to South Africa's Kruger National Park, with the longest tusked bull that is alive at the moment, I think, in Amboseli. Stand corrected here. I'm going to ask every one of us to, for those of us who are interested, not every one of us, obviously, but for those of us who are interested, let's see if we can find some facts to share with everybody on that. But this area in Africa and the Kruger definitely have some of the biggest tusked elephants that we find in the world today. And I must be honest with you that I have seen more big tusked elephant bulls around this pan in the last 2 days than I've seen in the last 2 years at any of the pans in South Africa. So that's my observation. Goodness, this is a great show. Goodness me, there's a lot of information out there about large elephants, but definitely East Africa and this particular region in the Kruger National Park hold the record for some of the largest elephants in the world, currently alive and in the past. And there's a lot of work done to actually save these big tuskers, to document them, to understand them a little bit better. In the Kruger, you've got the history of the Magnificent Seven and the current big tuskers, and they each got their names and where they live and habits that they formed. In other words, their personalities. And in East Africa, it's very similar. These big elephants are documented and they're well understood and looked after. Um, None of these guys seem to be in that category. And when you look at pictures of these elephants, you'll understand why. They are enormous, often with tusks very close to the ground and very thick. In fact, there's a new term called super tusker that's just come out, which is for elephants that carry ivory of over 100 pounds apiece, um, as reminiscent of stories that you may have read in, about old Africa, where hunters would only hunt elephant with big ivory for their trophy rooms, and every other ivory was used as a commodity that they traded in as a natural resource. Um, but nowadays, there's a lot understood about these big bulls. 100 pounds is 100 pounds. It doesn't matter whether you're on an elephant from the Kruger or an elephant from East Africa. But what it seems to show is that the elephant in the Kruger have bigger bodies and so look bigger. Whereas the elephant in East Africa look smaller and are slightly smaller in stature. And so their tusks look bigger. Hence me saying, 100 pounds is 100 pounds, but if you're a 100-pound tusk on a small bull elephant, it looks enormous. And I must be honest with you, these pictures that you can find on the web about these tuskers are just incredible. Um, and whereas you look at the bodies on these Kruger elephant, same size, but these elephants are just absolute giants. Interestingly, the heaviest elephant ever shot, well, recorded, I won't say shot, but ever recorded was in Angola. While we looking at this elephant doing his private business here, right next to the pan. With the biggest tusks ever recorded coming out of Tanzania, from what I can find. And when I stand corrected, I'd be the first one to say that information that's available is often incorrect and misquoted. And that's the beauty of having an interactive show like we have right now. Is you're welcome to put forward your comments and your findings, and we love to hear from you. So please feel free to do so. I'll gladly share what we can. And another story which may humor some of you is we've just watched that elephant deposit a very fibrous dung pile next to the pan. And elephants' digestive systems are actually so poor, well, they're so inefficient at digesting a lot of the vegetation that they eat because they're bulk feeders. Most of the seeds and things come out of the elephant whole and intact and get deposited in their own bed of compost, moist compost, like you're seeing there now, and in quite large volumes and weight. An elephant will eat 200 kilograms, elephant this size at least, will eat 200 kilograms of food in a day and drink 200 liters of water in a day. So combined weight of, let's say, 400 kilograms, and will defecate out 200 kilograms of dung that you're seeing there. And one recorded case was from an elephant depositing 80 kilograms, 160 pounds of dung in one go. Quite what we saw this elephant do, but can you imagine a 160 kilogram deposit? Goodness. And germinate an entire forest in that. But very important, elephant dung is used in a number of different applications. People make paper from it. It makes a wonderful, wonderful compost. It's a seed bed for any number of different seeds. Animals roll it around and lay their babies and eggs in it. Dung beetles, I'm talking about insects and flies, and it's just one of those marvels of nature. A package full of surprises. Must be honest with you, these elephants are hogging this waterhole exceptionally. Exclusively is probably the better word. We've had a number of zebra walk up to the water, lose patience, and move off. And now this giraffe has also walked up with some confidence and is now just hanging around on the edge waiting for his turn. And all the while, these elephants are just sucking up trunkfuls of water and just drinking it down. I wonder if there's going to be much left at all. I definitely think that these butterflies that we're seeing flying around here are the brown veined whites. Interesting to see, though, if we notice an increase in volume, and particularly if we see it in one direction. Well, if you've just joined us or rejoined us, we are at Africam's Old Donyo Cam up in Kenya, one of Great Plains Conservation's massive conservation areas. We're looking at a conservation area here, mixed use, but predominantly conservation of about 111, 110,000 hectares, which is way over the 200,000 acres, close to 250,000 acres. And in our view, we have a bachelor herd of elephant made up all of males and a male giraffe, Maasai giraffe, who's patiently waiting for his turn to come and have a drink at water, which is rapidly diminishing in great, not quite 200 or not quite 5-gallon trunkfuls. Definitely a substantial nose full of water every time. This elephant in front of us is going to be showing us how inefficient their digestive system is. And into the water. Gosh, you are bad. What are you doing? He's bad mannered. Gosh. What a show, right? You know, WildEarth brings it to you every time. But you know, just to point out again how important it is to have elephants in an ecosystem. They're known as keystone species because they have the ability to change the environment, but also for other species of animals' survival to hinge particularly on them. They counteract Mother Nature's growing plus by opening up gaps in the forest canopy and allowing sunlight down onto the forest floor, which of course is great for plants. They bulk feeders, and they have a very inefficient digestive system, which means that they are fertilizing and composting and spreading seeds across vast different distances out here. And those seed beds form the basis of not only great places to germinate, but also food resources for any number of animals, from dung beetles um, down to, gosh, any number of insects. I mean, even spider insects that are sitting on top of dung balls. And so they really are absolutely needed in the environment. And although there's some humor in what we were watching over there, and I do find them to be quite bad mannered by having gushed out that much urine into what is a tiny little water point, um, and then defecating it in as well. There's a lot to be said about the positive side of things. Now, I do have some feedback about the drought. The most current that I can find was published by the Kenyan government on the 12th of June in 2023, and it reads the following. The impacts of the March, April, May rainfall season has been realized in the arid and semi-arid counties, which are like provinces in Kenya, with 4 counties reporting recovery, while 17 counties report normal drought phase, and 2 counties reporting alert drought phase. With the conclusion of the March-May rainfall season, the government, through the multi-sector Kenyan Food Security Steering Group, will in July conduct long-range food and nutrition security assessments to determine the impacts of the long rains on local livelihoods. So the short rains have just finished. 2 counties remain on alert phase. 17 counties are in normal drought phase, and 4 counties are in recovery drought phase. However, there are issues of malnutrition owing to the time lag between drought recovery and food availability. Goodness me. People in need of assistance stood at 4.4 million following the short rains in 2022, and in February 2023. Additionally, the rains in most arid counties led to flash floods, which have negative impacts on the local livelihoods and critical facilities like roads, which obviously hamper abilities to get support in there. So that is our update on drought in Kenya at the moment. Looks like it's easing, although there are still some areas that are affected, and of course a lot of people are still affected by drought and their ability to feed themselves. And so I hope those of you who are interested in that sheds some light on that for you. Back to what we're looking at the moment. This bachelor herd here has one old bull, which is that big bull that you're seeing headbutting that youngster there. He's dominating the inlet pipe. This is an artificial waterhole, and it's been pumped, I would imagine, because that elephant has been at the same place now for quite some time. But what's happening is this youngster, who hasn't quite learned his place yet, is putting his trunk into the water source. He wants his turn to drink, and he won't settle for dirty water. He wants the clean water. And what has struck me is the gentleness at which that old bull has, just pushed him away. He's allowing him every now and again a little bit of a sip. And when he gets a little bit too close, he pushes him away, but never with any overt aggression. And you can't help but anthropomorphize elephant. They're just gentle and kind, and for me at least sort of epitomize the African continent completely. There's nothing that distills what Africa is more for me than the African elephant. It's strong and capable and terrifying, but at the same time super vulnerable and caring and nurturing and protective. Really is some musings around a campfire there coming out. I'm always struck by the size and shape of elephant tusks. We are being these giant tuskers in this area and the super tuskers around the Kruger National Park and Kenya, East Africa, Tanzania. But I don't know about you, but each individual person has their own preferences. Some enjoy tusks that are symmetrical, and others enjoy tusks which have a character, so it's like deformity or a noticeable chip or mark or shape to them. Um, where do you sit on the scale? Let me know. You're welcome to register on WildEarth's website, and you can send through your comments and your questions. But if you are there, or you want to register, you want to comment, let me know what tusk shape and size interests you. Definitely for me, I have a profound sense of symmetry, and so this elephant on the far right is the one that's capturing my attention. The shape of each tusk is beautiful. They've got a lovely curve to it. They widely spaced, but not too wide to make the elephant look weird. Um, and they seem to be almost identical in the way that they're shaped. This is the elephant now on the far right hand side. Whereas, even though that big elephant there in the back is quite majestic in his size, his tusks are not evenly shaped, and one is stubby, and although big and massive, it's giving me the same pleasant feeling that this one on the right is giving me. But like I said, it's totally personal preference. I think this giraffe has had enough of waiting for these elephants to finish. And he's decided to come and intimidate this youngster and see if he can get some in on some of the action. You watch that old man just shoved this youngster off now. Still gently though. I mean, these elephants can do each other some damage, and although this youngster is not listening, there you go. He's just very gently being shown off. I'm being taught that he needs to make some space for the old boys. This guy's now just coming in, asserting his dominance. Shame. This little guy is taking some straight. It's horrible being the smallest one in the group, isn't it? And now this old man is busy putting water behind his ears. Oh no, that's another. Gosh, I'm getting confused here myself. Spraying behind the ears, like that elephant's doing, that's where the greatest heat transfer happens. I know this because years ago, WildEarth was playing with some thermal imaging cameras, and during the day we managed to film dozens of elephant, and the thermal imaging showed hotspots behind the elephant's ears. And so by wetting these areas like this elephant is doing and letting the breeze cool down the water and evaporate it, they're cooling down their blood much faster than which would normally happen, and that is only a good thing in these African environments. And we're still busy joined with these elephants that are, well, one's having a proper bath at the moment, the others are just trying to drink. And so far he's managed to wet almost every single part of his body except the top of his head. And I think he's probably going to get to that now. Let's see what he does. Spray his feet, spray his tummy. See if he lifts his trunk up over his head. No one's drinking anymore, definitely not from that spout. Zebra coming in, seeing if he can muscle in on the action. I think these guys are just going to be, nope, we're still having our bath. Yeah, exactly. Quite intimidating trying to come in for a drink with these massive elephant around. One of the first animals that we saw this morning was a warthog. And what was quite clear was its ruff of its mane that it had along its back. And I said at the time that the only thing that was rougher than that was the hair on an elephant's tail. And let's see while we look at these ellies, probably going to be making their way off. See, look at their hair and the end of their tail. Although elephants are massive, you don't quite get a scale of how thick and coarse the hair at the end of their tail is. It's very similar to a baseball bat, and that hair is longer than the hair on the longer than the length of your arm in some cases, often more than the length of your forearm. Now, we've also been discussing tusks today. You can see now, for me at least anyway, that the most gorgeous pair of tusks are from this elephant that was just bathing, the one on the far left. No, not far left, second left. He's got super symmetrical tusks, and for me, that's the favorite. This guy here coming in from the far left, now he's got tusks that aren't quite symmetrical. One's higher than the other one. And then that big guy in the back there, he's broken one of his tusks off. And although his tusks are thickest, or his tusk is thickest, it's also short and stubby and doesn't quite look like it was looked after. At the time, I invited you to just write in with your comments and tell me what sense of symmetry do you enjoy? Do you enjoy ultra big, massive shafts of ivory, or ones like I do, which tend to be perfectly formed, at least for my eye, at least anyway? Oh, here comes another Ellie, or is this the same one from just now? There were 5 of them. This big guy forcing the younger one to give way. Let's see what happens to this one. Is he going to give way? No, reluctantly. So they share the same sort of tier on the hierarchy. Let's see how much patience they have with one another. With elephants, it's all about how big and aggressive you are. The biggest elephant obviously being the oldest, but they lose a fair share of their aggression the older they get. And wow, here we go. Massive elephant pushing his way in there. Look at that. Look at the way he just dominates this pool. Come in, make space. I'm the biggest guy here. Let's see. Gosh, what an epic surprise. He's just showing his boss. I am the biggest boy here. Make way. He's going to go straight to that fresh water, I bet you. Straight to the path. Immediately commands the best spot around, and everyone else needs to make space for him. Goodness me, what a surprise out of the bush here. As we thought a little bit earlier, there's probably a big elephant in the area, and all of these males together tell me that there's probably a female in the area that's in estrus at the moment. Her scent, perfume wafting everywhere. See, this big boy is just causing chaos. He wants his pool for himself, and he's not sharing it with anybody. So she's wafting her perfume, calling all these mature bull elephant from the entire region and giving them chance to wrestle with each other and establish a hierarchy. And you've just seen that in this particular group, that elephant with the big tusks is the boss. And at the point where that female is ready to conceive, she will submit to the biggest, or the elephant at the top of the hierarchy. And that seems to be this guy here. I'll just watch. They're having a variety of dust bath and water splash. I'm going to keep quiet for a bit and just listen to all of this activity going on. Now, for those of you just joining us, we are at Afrikaans Aldonyo Pan in southern Kenya. And this is a bachelor herd of elephant that we joined drinking water at this pan. And all of a sudden, this huge tusked bull, which is the one on the far left of your screen now, came charging out of the grass and chased them all away and has now commanded the best watering spot at the pan. And it's quite aggressively, well, let's say not quite aggressively, he hasn't attacked anyone, but let's say with a fair amount of confidence and success, he's managed to dominate everyone else at the pan to the other side of the water. And is now commandeering the source of the water for the pan exclusively to himself. Additionally, we've been watching these elephants wet themselves over the course of the last they came in and they drank first, and then some of the ellies sprayed themselves with some water, particularly behind the ears. And that's in an effort to cool themselves down. Like with most mammals, when it gets too hot, at a point you need to start to seek shade, because your core body temperature is at risk of overheating, and particularly with any type of exertion. And elephants have a fantastic way of managing that. And they pump all the blood in their body through their ears, which act as giant radiators. With most of the blood vessels actually being at the back of the ear. So you can see there, this elephant, one's using the other one as a scratching post. Bizarre. And And by wetting these areas, just the breeze flowing over that skin cools the blood down significantly, which allows these elephants to stay active for longer periods in the day. And obviously, that helps them to get the amount of food that they need pushed into their bodies. Gosh, that is a giant elephant. He's going to have his turn to mud bath. Let's see. Let's see what he does. And he's obviously decided that he's going to have a bath and everyone else is making space. And don't you find it interesting that he's managed to command an almost exclusive zone around him? Much wider than any of those other Ellies managed to do. Big boy for sure. I'm finding it so fascinating watching this elephant on the right hand side use his friend as a scratching post. He first used his friend's ear, and now he's used his friend's butt as a scratching post for an itch that he must have. That he needs his buddy for. Done now, but it is leaving us with such a great view of this giant tusked elephant. Not a super tusker, but definitely right up there with some of the biggest tusked bulls alive today. And he's having himself a proper mud bath. Spraying the mud and the water up everywhere. Getting it into every sort of wrinkle and crevice and nook and cranny. It'd be interesting to see if he washes his whole body or whether he just keeps his belly and ears wet. It's not uncommon to see elephants go for a swim and actually submerge themselves completely. A little bit further south on the border between Zambia and Botswana, there's a river there called the Chobe River, and there we've seen elephants submerge completely and go for swims. Djuma, we've seen elephants submerge completely and go for swims. This definitely isn't big enough for an elephant to go for a swim in, but I would imagine that the young elephant might even be able to roll over and roll around in the mud here. A giant elephant like this, he's not going to be doing any of that. I think he's just getting mud all over his flanks, jealously guarding his water. He definitely is intimidating the rest of these elephants. Look how they keep a very defined gap between him and themselves. And he won't tolerate them any closer than that. He's maintained that since he walked into this pan a couple of minutes ago. He's maintained that distance, and the others need to respect that, otherwise he will fight with them. Now taking the water and spraying it up into his mouth, getting rid of pests and dislodging things. Get that twisting motion. He's now eating from the same place that big elephant was doing yesterday. There must be a mineral deposit there, a specific type of clay that's there nowhere else. We've only seen the biggest elephants do that. We haven't seen any youngsters doing that. Shame these. We've had zebra waiting for a drink, we've had giraffe waiting for a drink, and now we've got eland waiting for a drink, and I don't think any of them are going to get a turn anytime soon. There we've got that elephant with the beautiful tusks drinking now from the fresh water. It's his turn. Isn't that a sight to these? This massive elephant bull. You can now see those two elephants compared to each other. You can see that their tusks, rather than facing down, are facing out. And that's a characteristic of bull elephant. And that's because they joust with each other. They'll use their tusks to fight with each other. And having tusks that are pointing forward allows you to thrust out with your tusks. And in fact, I've seen an injury on an elephant where the one elephant obviously gave up halfway through a fight and turned his head sideways, his opponent taking that opportunity to strike, and thrust his tusk behind the elephant's ear through his neck. And when we eventually found the elephant, we actually thought that he'd been injured by a human and that we needed to call the vets. And so we called the vets in and they darted the elephant, and we then found out that this wound was caused by natural causes. But the wound channel was deeper than my arm is long. And we cleaned it out of all the sand that the elephant had plugged it with to stop the bleeding. Isn't it just amazing that they know what to do, stop the bleeding, plug with sand, carry on with the day. We obviously cleaned it out, and since we had incapacitated the elephant to start with, we gave it a big dose of antibiotics and sent it on its way with about 2 liters of antiseptic cream into its neck. You can see how wet this elephant has made his flanks behind his ears in an effort to wet those blood vessels in the back of the ears. Doesn't look like it, but interestingly, about 20% of the elephant's body, the skin on its body at least anyway, is made up by ear skin. So, massive amount of real estate on an elephant's body is made up of the skin in its ears, and of course, that gives a greater surface area for heat exchange. They're just big radiators. See that elephant in the background there using his tusk to scratch his trunk. Can you imagine what it must be like to have teeth this size hanging out of your face all day? I wonder how long these Ellies are going to hang around this pan for. We've been with them probably for, I don't know, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. I lose a sense of time actually watching things like this. I'm speculating at the moment that there must be a female in estrus around which is calling all these males together, particularly this giant bull, and they've just decided that they're going to come and have a drink at the pub for lunch. There's eland bull, which would normally dwarf everything else around it. He's just arrived. You're looking at a 2,000-pound animal being dwarfed by largest of all the animals on land, so the African elephant. This big guy here that we're looking at probably weighs in at about 8,000 pounds, 4 to 5 tons. Substantially bigger than most small family cars. All these animals on the side just waiting for their turn. He's going to try and come in and have a drink. Let's see if this elephant tolerates him. Doesn't tolerate other elephants around. Let's see if he tolerates an eland. Zebra chickened out. Gosh, they finished so much water. Look where those elands having to walk to get to the water. See how many eland it takes to intimidate this poor elephant. So at a point, I would imagine if this elephant is not tolerant, that there will be too much competition around him. We now got the eland that have come in, which has given some confidence to the zebra. This one with its ears back is still showing me that he doesn't quite know what to expect from this big guy. Let's see if he's brave enough and what this Ellie's going to do. The feeling is he'll probably chase them if they get too close to him. But he's finished drinking now for the most part. He's just busy having his mud bath and eating his clay. So I'm not really worried about the competition for water. Nevertheless, never a dull moment, right? Okay, so here we have two eland now drinking. No, that's too close to it. That eland bull on the right, he's standing so proud at the moment. And he's trying to flex a little bit to this elephant. I think it's just subconsciously he's just a little bit intimidated, and so making himself look as big and majestic as possible. What a way to finish today's show, right? Spent a large portion of the day here at Africam's Aldonia camp up in Kenya. It's been so special to see any elephant, some buffalo even, crocodiles, impala, springbuck, oryx. No kudu today, no waterbuck today, no wildebeest today. Every day a surprise. And then this great bachelor herd of really big elephant bulls. Oh, and never forget the warthog, Maasai giraffe, and the ever-present zebra. If you've missed the shows and want to keep updated, we do have highlights of the best bits of everyday show available on WildEarth's app. And so you can head over to that or get that, and you won't miss any of the major action that happens on a day-to-day basis. This elephant is intimidating everything up. Let's see how tolerant he is of this one at the back. It's just busy sneaking a drink out of the freshwater inlet. Wastefully so, it would seem. And of course, of these eland and zebra. The zebra's ears are back. He wants to drink, or she wants to drink. She just doesn't have the guts to come. Come on, you can do it. One step forward. Go. And go. You can do it. Put your brave pants on. There you go. Come on. Go, 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 go. That is still back. There you go. Gosh, that's amazing. Donna, you are so right. Today, this waterhole has been such a treat. We really haven't, we didn't know what to expect, and it's just been incredible. And right now, what we're watching is animals are sort of using each other for confidence. One goes in, it was an eland actually, and now another and another. They've all been waiting their turn patiently. Elephant have sort of excluded anything else from drinking here for the last 45 minutes or so. Hour maybe. Now it is that time of the day where we're going to be wrapping up in the next couple of minutes or so. I just want to say thank you, and thank you for joining me, and thank you for all your questions and your comments. Thanks for keeping my brain going with all the information that you asked for, and for sharing this with us. WildEarth is doing such an incredible thing with all the partnerships that we got all over Africa. I just want to say thank you to everybody for their contribution to making this show happen. Definitely a highlight of my day. Thank you to all the staff behind the scenes which do their thing, without which none of this would be possible. Gosh, what a sight. I'm going to sign off and say goodbye, and for the last couple of seconds of the show we're just going to be listening to all those magic things that we can possibly do. See you all tomorrow.